Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am sorry that this is another asynchronous lecture that was really not ideal, but I do appreciate your understanding. As I mentioned on the eCampus announcement, I had really hoped to do it synchronously, but now that I started thinking about like, well, what if people lose power? What if I lose power? Maybe that's not such a good idea. So I decided to do it like this so that people can watch the lecture on their own time and they can get to a place where they definitely have power and so everybody can stay caught up and things like that. But here, let me go ahead and share my screen because I do have a PowerPoint, of course. Um, Oops, let's just go back here. Okay. All right, so we do have an LPA for today, so we have a little activity that you can get points for. What you want to do is you want to go on eCampus, and there should be, I think it's LPA 3, and you can look at the questions and sort of follow along or go back and listen to it later, whatever you want. But that'll be due in a week from when this lecture should have been put on, or a week from the time that I would have done this lecture in person. So, okay, let's get started. Some of the questions, the first two on your LPA this week are actually about things coming up. And hopefully, Morgantown will be back to normal on Thursday, and everybody can go in their breakout labs and we can have our first presentations, which are these very short I'm an expert speech presentations. Again, supposed to be pretty informal, sort of like an icebreaker. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that like you do need to have a fully fleshed out body with an intro, 2 points, and a conclusion, but no more than between 90 seconds and 2 minutes. Please keep in mind that attendance is mandatory on presentation days too, so you really need to show up. This time it's important because you probably will have to give your speech on that day, more than likely. But the other thing is we need an audience, and what it means to be mandatory means that nor ordinarily we don't need an excuse or anything like that. If you can't make class, you can't make class. But if you miss a presentation day, then you do need to submit some sort of like excuse to your TA and make sure that that's approved ahead of time. And then assuming it's not like the end of the semester and there's time to make it up, if you have an excused absence, we can arrange that. If you don't, you just lose the points, which also might not be the end of the world, but don't. We want your presentation. Okay, so what are we talking about today? Well, um, it's a little bit of a tie-in to what we were talking about last week. Remember last week, we were talking about how everybody has public speaking fear, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And we were starting to talk about some strategies, if you will, maybe not to get rid of the anxiety or the fear. I don't really think that's the appropriate goal, and that's sort of like a lifelong endeavor anyway. But things that we can do to start working with it, to identify it, things like that. So what I wanted to start off today and talk about is actually, I think, very related, and I hope that this is some helpful research that you'll be able to sort of keep in your back pocket and remind yourself of. There's this phenomenon called the spotlight effect that is basically it's the observation that most of the time people think that people are always thinking about us when really they're very rarely thinking about us. So we tend to overestimate how much people even notice us. Okay. So how this manifests like when you're giving a presentation is if you do something that you feel is embarrassing or if you messed up or anything like that, chances are the first thing that goes through your head is you're thinking, oh my gosh, people saw that, they're going to think I'm such an idiot or whatever, because you just assume that everything that you notice about yourself clearly is noticeable to all of these people who are watching you. But the reason that this is a psychological bias is because it's not really always accurate. More often than not, people are thinking about themselves. And if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense. What you're thinking about when you're trying to assess what other people are thinking about is yourself. Well, so are other people. And since you're about to do your first presentation, it's actually a really good opportunity, if you can, to kind of catch this in action. While you're watching other people's presentation, ask yourself, how often are you actually thinking about what they're saying? I know you're listening, but sometimes we have different tracks in our mind that are thinking about different things. What are you listening to? What types of things are you pulling out to help you process what people are saying? Are you, for instance, looking at somebody else's presentation and thinking about how you want to do exactly what they want to do, or you don't want to do what they want to do, right? Or maybe they do something embarrassing and it makes you feel uncomfortable and you're thinking about your own discomfort. That's the whole point. If you really stop and think about how you process other people, it's usually you're thinking about yourself. The reason this is important from an anxiety reduction point of view is because if you can kind of wrap your head around this and really take it in, okay, honey, you're getting kind of, she's making a lot of noise, and I'm going to try to put her down there. Okay, she's making me hot too. She's going to be good in a snowstorm. The reason this is a really helpful tool to just like kind of keep in mind is because um, you can remind yourself of this, right? You can kind of help yourself learn that a lot of your self-consciousness, which is responsible for a lot of your anxiety, is probably rooted in what's a false belief. So the first thing that you can do to sort of like use the spotlight effect in your advantage, I mean, in terms of understanding it and helping reduce your anxiety, is be aware, right? Just kind of remind yourself of that. Even though all these eyes are staring at you, chances are that's not really what they're thinking about. And then we've kind of talked about this before. Imagine a worst case scenario. So what? So what if these people are watching and they see certain things? What's the worst thing that can happen? And then this, which is sort of dovetails into like the rest of the conversation today. I'm sorry. Okay. She thinks she's a cat. Come here, honey. She's on the table. She's back. Okay. We do have a cat, and so she just never really learned that dogs can't are not supposed to do the same things as cats. Okay, but so anyway, so this transitions into what I want to focus on today, which is the audience, because one of the best things you can do to sort of mitigate your own anxiety and self-consciousness is take the attention off of yourself and focus it on them, right? So part of it is like being aware that other people aren't thinking about you, but what you also can redirect your own attention away from yourself towards other people. And so that's what I want to talk a lot about today. Thinking about how if you can just remove yourself from, or if you can remove yourself from yourself, if you can redirect your attention from yourself, then where will it go? It'll go towards other people, which, well, take away those feelings of self-consciousness and move them to other consciousness. But also, it's going to make you a better speaker because you're going to be a lot more in tune to what they're doing instead of, I mean, pardon my French, instead of having your head stuck up your own ass, right? So it really I'm going to say an other focused orientation for speaking is just extremely important for a lot of reasons. It can make you a better speaker for different reasons. I'm going to run through this really quickly. I know you have a question on your LPA. I do. So we're going to be talking about audiences and how, you know, which ones you're thinking about and how to think about them more and what you should be thinking about. But I do think it's important to know there are different types of audiences. You've got the audience who's actually there, but rarely do you know who they are. I mean, you can see them, but that doesn't mean you know who they are. So even your actual audience is kind of like iffy. Then you've got like an implied audience that maybe they're not even like watching, but they are an audience who has a vested interest in your topic. And so you're always sort of aware of them because you're like speaking for them, to them, whatever. And then you've got imagined audiences, which I think about is most relevant on social media, but not only. You know, on social media, when you put a post out there, you never really know who's going to see it, right? But you do have an idea of who you think it's for or who might see it. And so I do think the imagined audience tends to be something that's very influential because it's the type of thing that may or may not be real, but it's always sort of in the back of our head when we're crafting different messages. Okay, so thinking about how to be more audience focused. A lot of intro speech textbooks, like if they're, you know, to intro to public speaking, they'll actually recommend that students do like an audience analysis where they do surveys of their audience. Personally, I always think that to try to find out information about them, like what their demographics are, what their age is, what their attitude is, political beliefs, whatever the case is. And I think that's great because it really teaches people how to, okay, well, I know my audience is X, Y, and Z. So how do I then craft my speech to actually serve these people, like to target them, if you will? Um, I just think it's a little unrealistic because I've never in my entire career had the opportunity to actually survey my audience before I get to speak with them. That said, I think the point is more of the intellectual activity is what we're going for. So it's just the idea of whenever you're crafting your own message, don't think about me as your audience. Don't think about your TA as your audience. You've got to kind of think about everyone. You've got to think about, and that is, by the way, how I hope you'll do your speech. I know that I'm not the typical audience member because I'm not another WVU student, but that is who I think that when if I was grading your speech, I would. There's the cat. That's they love each other. Actually, you can see he kind of freaks the pugs out, but it's okay. That's Eggnog. Okay, bye Eggnog. Um, so even though we're not going to do a formal survey, I do think it's good to kind of go through the mental exercise as if you were doing a survey. Um, and I have a little activity that we would spend a lot more time with if we were meeting in person, but it's on your LPA. And like, so this is like a one little mental exercise that you can kind of flex your other oriented audience muscle doing. Think about if you had a speech topic like, what's it like to be a WVU student? So somebody at WVU is like, hey, you're a WVU student. Would you give a talk to this audience to tell them like what a day in the life of being a WVU student is? And I have all these different, like, think about how what you say would change based on who you were talking about. And the example I put in your LPA, which I want you to think about, but these are all interesting, possibilities, is like, okay, let's say you're going to give two talks, and one of them is to students who are or potential students who are thinking about coming to WVU. And maybe you're trying to persuade them, or maybe you're just trying to give them a snapshot of like what it's really like here. And so you talk to people like these people who are going to live here versus then you have to give another talk and talk to their parents, the people who are going to pay the tuition and agree to let their kid come here and persuade that, just think about for this activity how, based on what you assume about those audiences, and listen, you might be right or wrong. A lot of this is about stereotyping, but I want you to kind of, again, flex that muscle to see what we're getting at here so you can relate it to your own topic. How, if you were talking to another audience, it might be different. But given that you are talking to other WVU students, I want you to start thinking about what assumptions do you have about them. And therefore, even though you could give the same speech about your topic to any other audience, I want you to start thinking about, okay, but this is my audience. Who do I think they are? What do they need to understand my presentation? What do they need to be entertained by my presentation? What kind of pre-existing knowledge do they have? What does it matter that they tend to be from a specific region? We know that, other WVU students, they at least have a high school education. So we kind of, there are certain things we know, and then there's a lot of stuff we don't know. So we have to just sort of find, some sort of like happy medium in between and then shape our message accordingly. Um, Okay, but once you do know your audience, and again, we're not going to survey them, but I want you, part of the goals of the LPA this week is for you to start thinking about to stereotype them a little bit. Think about your topic, what the topic you think you want to do. You're not married to it yet, but ask yourself, okay, what do I think about my audience with respect to this topic? And once you kind of know that, once you have that in your head, the next thing you have to do is say, okay, so why should they care about this topic? I want to do a presentation, and my examples actually on the LPA this week are about backyard chicken keeping. I told you I used that last semester too. Okay, so backyard chicken keeping is a huge topic. There's so many things you could talk about there, and I'm like, okay, if I'm giving a speech to a bunch of undergraduate WVU students, why should they care? And this answer could range because I know what you're thinking. You're like, bitch, I don't care about backyard chickens. Like I get it. But when I say care, I could also just mean like, why would they want to listen to me talk about it? Is there anything I can do that would make it more interesting? Maybe it's just because I could talk about something that's weird and bizarre. Maybe it's because it does have relevance to their lives because because bird flu, I'm going to talk about bird flu, and that has some sort of effect in their life, like because we know bird flu kills cats. I don't know, that was kind of a morbid one, but he was just standing right there. But the point is I know there is some way that if you love your topic, that you can make it relevant to your audience. But what I want to see you do is think about your audience and then kind of work backwards and say, okay, what do they need? How do I get them to a place where they're going to like my topic and that I'm going to feel good talking to them about it and they're going to understand what I'm saying? Um, and then these are some other questions. This is kind of leading us into what we're going to be doing next week. But it's now time. You'll be done with your I'm an expert speech. The next step is pretty much everyone I saw that was talking about their different ideas. This is completely normal. It's kind of what I asked for, has really broad topics. It's going to be time to narrow it. You're going to have to give a speech. Your next speech is only going to have three main points, and you're going to have to do it in about 5 minutes. So it's got to be short just for that reason, and you got to pack in a lot of stuff. So you need to be somewhat specific about what you're saying. But how do you narrow it? Once again, you got to think about your audience. You got to think about your context. Again, it's sort of like reverse engineering it a little bit. I know you know a lot about your topic, but you've got to think about it from somebody else's perspective and then kind of walk yourself back to make it into something that you know they can follow. Um, so on that note, we are not going to, our next lecture is going to be actually on putting together the speech and organizing it and outlining it. Kind of what's going to be happening is you're going to kind of be behind in your labs. Like I do this lecture right now with the anticipation that not this week, but the week after, you'll start to actually implement these types of things. But this also gives you the ability to kind of catch up, but also look ahead and make sure that before you're coming into your labs, you kind of like know what you're getting into. And I would highly recommend, even though, again, Thursday you've got your speeches, and then you might be some more speeches the next Thursday, and then you'll also start to do some of this audience analysis stuff. But then the week after, you're going to be doing some actual outlining, maybe some research. We're going to have a little workshop on that. So if you want to see how all of this kind of comes together, I recommend just checking out the instructions for your next in-person informative speech so you can see all the requirements, and that might make everything kind of stick together a little bit more. Hopefully you'll see the logic here. But okay, I do hope that if you're watching this, that you're safe and warm and hopefully maybe even enjoying yourself and I don't know, eating good food, playing video games, being cozy, whatever floats your boat during a snowstorm. I am very much looking forward to seeing you again. I hope I get to catch some of your speeches this week. And all right, stay safe. I'll see you next week. Bye.